Okay, we're going to talk about David's knee pain. So to set the scene, he's had ongoing knee pain for 16 years, which has gotten in the way of his basketball, military, and now CrossFit career. It manifests primarily as on the front of the knee. We think it's some form of patellar tendonitis, and he's had mixed luck with managing it over the years. So we're going to do an investigation as to what we think might be the cause. At the point of appointment, he had just had an MRI scan, so we're waiting to hear the results of that. But as always, we want to understand the biomechanics behind why it's arisen in the first place, because that's going to be relevant regardless of the condition of the knee. As always, quick caveat, these are his mechanics based on what we saw in assessment. We spent a lot of time together, so these aren't the only things that we saw and the only things that we worked on, but I think they're the useful salient points to help your understanding of typical knee issues. So let's get into it. The first one we saw, the first indicator of mechanism, would be that his feet are naturally very supinated. That means he holds a very high arch, and this is quite common in basketball players because they do so much jumping. So actually having quite a stiff foot is adaptive for that sport, as it helps with springs and jumping. And the key thing we saw was that he never really gets into a fully pronated or flattened foot state. So as you see here, he gets a really nice high arch, which a lot of people would be envious of, but he doesn't come out of it very much. So we would expect more of a drop of the arch towards the floor as he rotates away from that leg, but he kind of just goes from high arch to slightly less high arch, which will impact his ability to dorsiflex the ankle and close this angle, which obviously is important in squatting. So the next thing we looked at was his squat. Obviously, the primary triggers for his pain were high volume squatting and rebounding or impact activities such as rebound box jumps and running. So in his squat pattern, one of the first things or the standout things we see is his weight distribution. So if we try and draw a plumb line down the middle of his body, if we start from the feet up, we can see that actually more of his weight is over to his right hand side. So his head is slightly right, his shoulders are slightly right, and his hips are pretty in the middle of his legs. So that lets us know that more of his mass is on the right hand side. So we're pressing down through this leg. So the picture we're building now is that this right ankle is stiff and he's got more weight on his right hand side, both of which could be reasons why this right knee is getting overloaded. So we had some other things that we don't have time to go into today, but I'm going to give you a couple of the exercises we designed for him to address these issues. The first one was to work on his ankle dorsiflexion. So another thing which we didn't show in assessment was that he would quite often lose pressure through the big toe during his balance exercises and squatting. So because he was losing pressure through this big toe, that is one of the things that can block the ability to pronate the foot, which is closely linked to ankle dorsiflexion. So we've put a wedge under the ball of his big toe here, so he maintains that contact so you can feel where the floor is, and used an upper body driver to have him go into ankle dorsiflexion with a slight turn in to help unlock that ankle. And if we watch it here, we can see that foot start to spread a little bit better and the arch drops towards the floor better. So all of these bones start moving this way, which means the ankle unlocks and we can get much better dorsiflexion through this right ankle. Now that we've just created new range of motion, it's really important that we build strength and stability in that range of motion. So the next exercise we built into his program was a form of calf raise. So here we go on the plate. So the reason we've gone for a bent knee calf raise was that one of his compensation patterns was actually to get a lot of tightness through his gastroc. So the higher two-part calf muscle, and he would find it quite difficult to get much out of his soleus muscle. So bending the knee blocks the ability for the gastroc to get so involved, so we can focus more on that soleus muscle. So if we see a few reps here, what we're looking to do is get him into that maximum ankle dorsiflexion range that he's just created, and obviously adding load into the soleus muscle to force it to contract out of this nice long position and get him back towards plantar flexion. So he's building strength and stability, obviously because it's single leg, and he's only got those 2 points of contact at the front of the foot here to challenge his ability to balance. So getting a few things, good bang for buck in that exercise for him. Right, as we move on to try and rebalance the squat, we saw that he was putting too much or a majority of his weight through his right leg. So in an effort to get some of the work done on his left leg and take it away from that right knee, we've gone for a left leg split squat, but we've chosen a left shoulder load in a bid to get more weight over to the left-hand side and also put him into a slight left lateral flexion. So that means he'll be leaning slightly this way to counteract the right lateral flexion we saw in his squat before. So we'll see here that it's actually quite challenging for him to get over there because he's so unused to loading that left leg. He's bailing out of it a little bit, leaning over to the right. So as he goes over to the left, we can see he loses balance. The foot starts to shift over as he's learning to control that new position. And that's a great sign that it's somewhere we need to get him more to develop more skill and the ability to load that left leg. One important update is that since the appointment, David got his MRI results back and he had a tear to his lateral meniscus, which he had the surgery for to get trimmed out, and it went well. And since then, he's been very diligent with his rehab. We worked together to get his range of motion back and his stability progressing towards full motion before starting to load up and responding to the feedback his body gave as to what was an appropriate pace of progression. So with the physical side of things dealt with the surgery and with the underlying biomechanics more in hand, we're really optimistic to see what he is capable of for the next phase of his training.